All right, well, welcome back to the Ownership Advantage podcast. This is the Coach's Corner episode. And with us today, we've got Coach Andy O'Brien. He's one of the senior partners and master coaches here on the Action Coach Benefit Group team. I know it's been a while since we've, one, done a podcast, two, we've never done the Coach's Corner. So for those that are watching and listening who may not know you yet, Andy, do you want to give a bit of an introduction? Just kind of tell us a little bit about who you are, what your background is, anything that you specialize in or just love to talk about when it comes to business dynamics and that sort of thing.
All right. So we started this firm. Well, we started as a practice coach 15 years ago, and didn't grow it into a firm until 2020 when Tanner joined us. I do the majority of the coaching for our company, and Tanner does operations and runs the company as the CEO, and I stay where I need to be. You asked about what I love to talk about. Everything. I'm kidding. I mean, and and but yeah, I mean, favorites. I think some of my favorite stuff to coach on is really when the business owner gets stuck. Um, I know you're going to probably laugh at this one, but favorite is also because I was stuck for a long time in our business, which gave me clear line of sight of all of my shortcomings that helps the client. So, we talk management leadership, accountability, numbers, all of these areas come into the business. And, most importantly, how do we set it up? What's the SOP that goes along with it? So that's kind of a brief synopsis.
Well, before we get into kind of like topics, because I do want to go deep for the audience today in terms of kind of some things that we're seeing in the coaching world, how you would kind of guide somebody through some of the challenges they may be facing. Um, but outside of this business, like you've got a long history of kind of independent business ownership, management, sales, leadership types of things. Give us a little bit of the context of like where were you at prior to becoming a business coach?
Great question. So, grew up in a family business. That was my grandfather's business. You guys can't see it, but it's on the wall over here. Then it was my father's, but we left that business. We started our second business. Forgive me, our other business partner had her graphics design business, and then we went into a sales and marketing role. And we sold high end cabinetry. We covered all the warm states, North and South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin. It's a far cry from here in Texas, but we sold year over year about $5.7 million in product, and we sold it to independent dealers and lumber yards and design centers. So I have an affinity for woodworking. I left that business, got hired on as a senior vice president for this little tiny company called Owens up in Shawano, Wisconsin. And I tell everybody I got my second MBA there. Everybody jokes about that, but I got my second MBA in all the stuff business owners should never do. The owner of that company did them all. And that company actually ended up in receivership for a little tiny problem called larceny. We won't go into that on this call, but I did that. And then I got hired as a general manager of a startup. Really wasn't my cup of tea. It was in the herbicides area. Didn't really fit me, and looking for something to do. And in the interim, seeing businesses fail, including my father's business, end up in bankruptcy, we started a coaching practice. And when I say coaching practice, it was me. I did all the marketing, all the sales, all the coaching. And I don't think I did any of them really good, but we do have a pretty good long-term clients that have still been with us since those early days, on and off again. So that's kind of how we got here today.
I wanted to highlight that for a second because I think it lends to some of the topics we can talk about today and things that you've seen with clients. But just to reiterate some of the things that you mentioned, being in the building products industry, if I'm not mistaken, the date range of that, kind of the tail end date range of that, I think hit right around the 07, 08 crisis. Like you might have seen a few things not go as
Just
well as planned.
just a couple. Just a couple. Yeah. The Big Short, they called it. Um, yeah, we saw a lot then. It's funny because you go back to COVID and you even go to today versus the economic stress of today versus the economic stress then. And there's a lot of similarities. Gas was $4, $5, $6. What is gas today? $4, $5, $6. If you live in California, it's eight something. You live in New York, it's eight something. Here in the central Texas, but a lot of that, we're at war. Another thing that was going on, uncertainty in the marketplace. And the one common theme that has proven itself time and time again is the person with the most cash wins.
It's an interesting, yeah, interesting topic. So you went through that. You mentioned seeing Grandpa have to close the business. You've gone through working for a company that has gone into receivership, and you saw what it was like to work at kind of a startup that wasn't a best fit for you. And then, of course, all of the lessons that are learned in growing and building this specific business. But I wanted to kind of pull that stuff together because you had mentioned at the very beginning of the things that you love to take business owners through tends to be the areas that they're stuck. And not only because they're stuck, but because you've seen and felt what it's like to be in that moment and the behavior change that's required with it. So when you're looking at some of the clients today, and I think this is where we can kind of get into the real kind of coaching side of things. Before we jumped on this call, you had mentioned kind of management, identity. Obviously, numbers is always going to be a big piece, but let's dig into, in today's world, with things shifting all the time, what does management look like? How do you define that for the clients, and how do you guide them through transitioning from I started a business to now I got to figure out some of these management things as I start to bring on people?
That's a great question. So let me define management as this: actual, let me, quotes, actual management is management of a process. Actual management is a management of a process that has standards attached to it. So let me be clear. People always say, well, you're really good at that. You were a really good technician. You should be the supervisor. You should be the manager. Well, that was really cool in the 80s and even in the 90s and even in early 2000s. But when you do that today, the greatest challenge that you face is they have no idea how to manage other people because you didn't teach them, right? They're really good at their job. That doesn't mean they're really good with people. They can't articulate how they do it. They just done so well and they become unconscious and competent at the role that, oh, you should be able to teach everybody. Well, they're not the same thing. It's comical today. It wasn't comical when I had to go through it, but it's comical today because if you don't know what to do or how to do it, how are you supposed to help somebody else do it? That's the thing, because every time they get stuck, then you're just going to run down and do it for them.
So how do you rectify? How do you bring that together with this prevailing idea out there that you just hire people that are smarter than you? Go hire the people that can do it. You don't need to know. Just go hire great people, and they're talented, and they know more than you, and they should. That's what you should do.
That prevailing thought sucks because as an owner, right? So employee 20 days, 29 days a month, and owner a couple of days a month. You should hire somebody. They should have some skills. They should have more will. If you don't know how you want it done, letting somebody else just run with the keys to the castle always ends in a train wreck. It always does, because they're going to do something somewhere. Well, they let me do this, I can do this. Well, now you haven't gotten controls in place, and you can never replace that person if they irritate you. So back to your original question, and we learned this the hard way. If we're unwilling to learn it, how are we going to teach somebody to do it? And I'm not saying you have to be an engineer. I'm not saying you have to be the CPA. I'm not saying you have to be the salesperson. but you have to have competency in some form in all of those roles. So you, me, you listening out there, you can set standards in place for those roles, right? Because the standards are built around your business, what you want them to accomplish, what the end result is, not built about how they want to do it. And they're only going to do the things they want to do. That's not how it works.
So when you think of management today, has it changed since what management was over the past 10 years or past 20 years?
Yes, absolutely. The real shift in management really took place after COVID. Prior to COVID, businesses were just rolling along, right? Economy was good. Wall Street was good, and everything kind of was just flowing. And so we had a lot of fat in a lot of businesses. And we could look at, well, people were doing their jobs and so forth. So we managed from a distance because you could afford to have extra employees. You could afford, like, well, we hired them. It's not a big deal, just a couple of extra hours. Okay, so that was pre-COVID. What did we learn in COVID? Had to have cash, keep your business running, right? You couldn't, like, yes, there was EIDL money and there was PPP money. And a lot of people, hopefully not listening to this, mismanaged that. I know our clients didn't. But there was a government handout that a lot, and I'm saying that very carefully, it was a handout and you have to pay it back. So now it's a loan, you pay it back monthly, whatever it is. Now, from then, we had to start learning to manage standards because economics showed us that not everything was opening equal. And we started this phase of everybody can work remote, right? Everybody can work remote. Well, now we're bringing people back because what we've learned is working remote every day is not okay because we don't have standards put in place to manage people and their time. So the pendulum, right? So in the pendulum, we had people went on remote work and all of us did this. We just worked all the time. We worked all the time. We had all these things going on. We just worked. We did laundry. We took care of the kids. We did whatever. Well, now we've seen the pendulum shift back the other direction from remote work, where we're calling people back to the office because productivity is not being completed in a reasonable amount of time. And so there's people out there that are going to argue with this, but this is what we're seeing in the business world. People are calling people back to work in bricks and mortars, and they're asking for standards today. How does Andy do his job? What are the things he needs to do every day in order to be successful in his job? And if we don't have standards in place, that's the management. You're managing standards, you're leading behaviors, right? So you manage them to the standard of what you set for your business, how the work's going to get done, what they have to do, what activity, what happens when these things aren't reached, how do they reach out for help? We're managing all of those areas and they're built into a process. And then we're managing the behavior that goes with it or the emotions in some case. And that has really shifted today versus, I mean, you look 20 years ago, we didn't care about emotions.
So why has that changed? What do you think has driven the change to needing to really understand the emotions behind the behaviors that are required?
Because people don't, the market today, people don't have to stay with you. They don't. It's been an employees market for years. And employees, if you've looked, there's a history of job jumping. And I'm not saying we need to give them Skittles and beanbag chairs, but we have to be aware of what are the CNEs, right? We call them CNEs, critical non-essentials, to manage to a process, because not only does that help you, it gives the employee clarity. There should not be any more confusion about what an employee's role is in the business with those standards. It gives them total clarity on everything that's going to happen in the business. And it gives them controls in place so that when the old days, when they said your job description instead of a positional agreement said, oh, hey, I need you to do this, 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 and this. And oh, by the way, any other duty deemed necessary from management. Okay, that ship has sailed. That doesn't fly anymore. It gives them the ability to know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. So you can go back to your boss, your supervisor, your manager and go, hey, all of a sudden, these 4 or 5 things have been added to my plate, but they're not here. And then it gives you the ability as an employee and an employer to have real conversations about how do we set that standard for those new parts of the role.
So
And that's way different.
I want to take it back a step on this because I think this is an interesting piece to dig into. What's created the optionality? Like, if it's an employee's market, or has been, and they can choose to get up and go anywhere, what's led to that change? How is it different from the 70s or the 80s, or you think the differences in generations from Gen X like yourself, or millennials like myself, or the Gen Z below me? You see different behavioral patterns, I think, in each one, and obviously there's a whole host of things to talk about in terms of like upbringing and what things were like during the formative years of those times. But looking specifically back at the last 6 to 10 years, because obviously 6 takes us back to COVID, 10 takes us a little bit beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
What's driving the optionality? If employees can just get up and leave, or as we've even seen probably more frequently than ever that I've ever noticed, employees that just like literally leave, don't say anything, they just leave.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
So what's driving that? Like, are there really that many different opportunities? Like, how do we bring that together? Because we can come and we can talk standards. We can get into the nitty gritty of like what to do as a business owner to prep positions for success. Lots of things to unpack there. Don't know that we'll get into all of it today, but I think there's some things on the behavior aspect that I'm curious on, and kind of thinking through what's led us to this point. Why is it all of a sudden quote unquote acceptable to have to jump jobs all the time, to do these different things? And like I'll say, I was one of them who went through multiple different career paths early on in my years. In your experience, what might be behind that, or what could be driving that?
Okay, so I want to define this as this is not one generation. This is a societal whole as we became a microwave society. I want it now. Right? And so the biggest thing is for employers, we had to figure out, and we're still figuring it out, like even with standards in place, we cannot control the emotions of others. So let's go back to the 70s, 80s, 90s, even early 2000s. There was this word out there, and people were raised with this loyalty term, right? We were just satisfied. We were just satisfied. We were not me, of course. I live in the world of I want more, but satisfaction, right? I'm satisfied with my role. So this may be getting us off path, but as a microwave society, as I want it now, is there so many influences on society? Doesn't matter the age group. There are boomers that still work, Gen X, Z, millennials, you name them all. And we want what others have today. So what has changed is the people of today, I believe they always look at the grass is always greener somewhere else versus what do I need to do to personally get better? Right? Jim Rohn, most people would call it 100 years ago. It's probably 30. Never wish your life was easier. Wish my life, wish I was better. That's not the society we live in today. People want to know we care about them. That wasn't a thing when I was growing up. It wasn't a thing in the early 2000s, right? it's a joke. This is a joke, but I pay you a salary. I pay you hourly. You should be happy. That isn't the case anymore, right? You do a job, you get paid. They want more. And again, I'm not disagreeing with them, but the microwave society is always looking at what's better, what's better, what's better versus how do I get better to have more to grow in this role?
So this actually brings up kind of an interesting way to think about this, and it's the reason why. If you think back to like, if an employee is going to leave or go to another company because they feel it might be quote unquote better, what's the rationale? Like, what's the reason driving it? Is it money? Are there other emotional factors behind that? Like, what have, at least in the recent couple of years, let's just talk the last year or two for this particular part, in today's economy, in today's cultural reality, what do you see as driving that change, or the loss of employees or inability to get new employees? Is it the money question? Is it something else? What tends to be the dominant factor, even though there could be multiple?
That is a slippery slope. I'm going to say it's subconsciously it's going to be money, but it's also from a standards point is, do we care enough? Right? Do we make them feel important? Right? Which is really odd from a lot of people because I find from importance from within. Right? I don't, it's not about me, but when you look at employees today, and you have to remember, people, I'm taking a sample size of hundreds of businesses over the last 15 years. This is what we're seeing is specifically today is when we see people jumping, it's one, I think it's subconsciously money. Two, I think it's, well, I want to feel validated, but also three is I believe that it gets hard. It actually gets hard and people want easy. We've got several companies that we work with. Like we have one of our companies right now that needs 11 employees. 11. Guess what? They are in a super hard industry that in Iowa, it snows. It's 30 below. Guess what? These people have to work outside in the wintertime. It is hard. People don't want to do that anymore. They want comfort. But then you take it here and you look at, oh, I'm driving a delivery van all day long and I have to unload buckets or I have to wait on people. And that's hard. I think those are things that we as owners skim over. Like I do it every day. Why can't you? And that's not the reality that people live in. Nobody's ever going to care as much as you or me. So we have to really look at the psychographics of this.
I'm going to take this as, I'm not going to say it's a full tangent, but I think it's relevant to the idea behind this and kind of where we're at today. And that is the topic of AI, right? And you start thinking about
yes,
what things are going to be replaced by AI first, and it's not the manual work. Yes, robotics eventually can catch up and start to do those types of things. There's a lot more behavior change and things that are needed for all of that adoption. But the digital technology is catching up. And I'm not a doomsayer thinking that we're going to lose all of these jobs and everyone's going to be in trouble. Yes, there will be a transition period, but I think it's ultimately there's going to be a lot of things that we can't even foresee that will be very positive in terms of job outlook. That tends to be my optimistic approach. However, if at least in the short term, one of the biggest constraints in the workforce is people don't want to do hard, and I mean like manual, physical, difficult, challenging things. And AI can take care of all of the things that aren't that. What happens?
adapt, right? Automation. How do we innovate within an organization? Now, there are certain things that, I mean, let's just talk driving a tow truck. Okay. We're not going to go to the Jetsons. For those of you that are too young for that, go look it up. Little hovercraft goes over, pulls the car out of the ditch. Never going to happen. But for businesses, we have to innovate. We have to figure out, how do we do it faster, better, smarter, easier? You and I you could do an entire new book on Andy's pigheadedness, right? Blocking, like thinking about it. I'm being serious here for a second. It is hard for people of all ages to look at innovation as easy. They always look at it as, well, I can't do this. Like you said, optimism. But one, we have to embrace technology. We have to. It's not going anywhere. It's funny. I had yesterday, you'll appreciate this one, Tanner. Oh, I'm just never going to get into it. It's such a waste of time. AI is not going to be here. And another person in the room and said that. He goes, well, they said the same thing about the horse and carriage. How many people are taking a horse to work? Like like this is coming at full steam. We must embrace it.
So, I mean, I want to bring this back to kind of the core of the question there, though. Like, what happens if one of the constraints is like we're finding it difficult to find skilled enough workers for, we'll call it some of these blue collar, more manual labor types of industries, right? So you mentioned driving a tow truck as one example of this. Out of curiosity and the things that you're seeing coaching clients, does money solve that problem? If the wages on those types of roles were double what they are today, would that resolve the vast majority of those constraints?
To my knowledge right now, no. It would not solve that. Things that we're looking at, they're the highest paid people in the marketplace. And no matter what the money is, it's still hard. It is an attitude. It is an attitude shift for that type of a role.
I guess what I'm thinking out loud here. So
Right.
being more of a coach's corner conversation, I'm kind of throwing ideas out just to like see how you would think through them. I wonder, when you think about this contextually, does more money and more participation in that part of the labor segment, does that solve it? And the reason I go that direction is if businesses start to incorporate AI at different levels and find ways for all of those other things that AI can't fully do at this point, because it takes more actual hands and feet and things of that nature. If a business reduces its payroll on paper, at least headcount wise, in all of those kind of office digital sides of things, because AI can do a lot of the work. Maybe you go from 5 people down to 1 person. You have 4 people that are being quote unquote displaced. But you have all that cash flow back that then could be rediverted back towards paying more, potentially double, to these other types of roles. Now, I get this won't work in every single business, but just thinking about it contextually, wouldn't that naturally mean that there's more opportunities there for those types of jobs, and those are going to be higher paying than any job that was previously had before? Like, I think of some of my early jobs, I'm like, okay, if I made, we'll call it $20 an hour, but all of a sudden I was offered to get paid $50 an hour to go drive a truck instead of having to like think through this hard creative work. Are people really not going to take that?
That's an interesting concept. I think some will, but there's still that component of what does it look like on the other side? So let's say it's $50 an hour, so it's $100K a year. Let's just say it's 120. Let's just throw that number out there. Yeah, it's a great possibility to say, yeah, you can make $120,000 a year. You're going to have to work nights, weekends.
But maybe not. Maybe not. You may have nights or weekends, because again, you think back to think doubling that part of the workforce because you have more participation into it. You no longer have to think about, it's either this shift or it's this shift. You may change behavior in terms of that, but You may have less of the like, I'm working 80 hours or I'm working 60 hours, because more participation, better for the business, because now you don't necessarily have to pay overtime. You can actually have
Right, right.
proper shifts. But then it's a simple continuous cadence that someone can get in on, rather than sometimes I have to work nights and weekends. Sometimes it's just long days. Maybe I have to do a double shift. You start having kind of different ways to think about it. Again, all of this is totally speculative, as we don't know, but I just think through what are things that could happen and how does that change behavior. So I think at the core of all of this, and the thing that I'm guessing you as a coach have to deal with all the time, whether it's with employees or with the owners or with C-suite executives, behavior change is probably the biggest constraint or
It,
challenge that you have to work through.
yeah, when you went back to the core of the question, the thing that came to my mind was that saying that when you pay peanuts, you continually get monkeys, right? And yeah, it's a total behavioral change. And it also goes to in these, well, let's talk, in these industries, right? Hard. Let's look at, so this is a very unique industry. So you're right. I don't know if you pay them $50 an hour, if that'll change or not, if all the rest of it's done. But yeah, participation, can they learn the skill? Absolutely. An opportunity to start ferreting out. And I think I will. But then you flip the coin over. So you just said that about, how do we change people's impression of what a job is, right? Behaviors. So electricians, mechanical, plumbers, welders, the highest paying jobs anywhere today. And we still can't fill those positions.
It's almost like you have to think about where do they go instead? Where's that participation actually happening? And my curiosity, and I know that there's some numbers floating around this, and I don't have all of it in front of me, but how are large companies impacting this? If some of these massive tech giants didn't exist, or maybe that's not the right way to think about it, but if there was double or triple the amount of small businesses out there versus these insanely large corporations, how does that change the dynamic in terms of optionality, in terms of participation, I guess, in these other levels? If there's just an eighth of the availability to go work at a place like Facebook, as there historically has been, that's 7/8 of that workforce that now has to go somewhere else. If every large company has that same thing, then your participation is very different into the small business world. And my guess is the numbers are very different in the small business world if you start looking at why do they do or don't take like an electrician role versus go work for another small local business. I feel like that's different than saying electrician versus large tech company.
And I think you're right. So it's to your point, I was doing some research on this. So we are, so I know we talk in decades and most people this won't matter to, but if we look back historically at the last big shifts in industry, the last big shift in industry was really the Great Depression into World War II, right? Because it was a shift of we have cars, we have nothing, and now we're going into this great boom. And now we fast forward almost 80 years. And in the coaching world of getting people to see, you know, history has a way of repeating itself, and businesses have a way of going through the same cycle over and over, not recognizing that they've made mistakes. But to this point about people, it goes back to that whole cultural / vision mission story of why are you working for me versus Tanner? right? What does the business give the employee? How do we train the employee? How do we make that employee feel welcome? How do we get the most out of that employee? And how does that employee get the most out of me versus punch a clock, go to work, you're just a number. Yes, we pay you better, we have better benefits. And I think what you just said, it goes back to America was built on the backbone of small business, right? You look even in our marketplace to that point about people going to work at a small business allows you, and when I just for economic sake, a small business, according to the US, I can't think of the name of what they call it. A small business is 50 million to 250 million, and a micro business is underneath that. Sorry if I'm offending people, but that's how it's categorized. But going to work for somebody that is local to your community, you'll get more out of it as an employee because you have those things that you may never have had before, right? So circling this all back to that original question about, the difference is by working for a smaller micro business, 10 million or under, if we have, 10 or 12 electrician companies versus a giant tech company, you actually have the ability to move up faster, learn better skills, and help yourself faster than you would if you went to work for a Facebook, if you didn't already have those skills. Does that make sense? Does that sound crazy?
No, it does make sense. And I think that's probably more true today than it ever has been because the things that you would learn at a larger company are now free. AI has made that abundantly clear that skill set that you could learn at larger companies from a knowledge base, maybe hands on, maybe a little bit different. The information's free. It's a very different world that we live in. Now, of course, there's the accountability and the behavior of actually going and doing it. That's what the structure of an organization, small or large, it's the exact thing that the education system does. It creates the accountability to learning the things. But it's curious to think about, and I want to bring this back to knowing that the primary audience here is going to be the business owners, and I think this is a worthwhile thing to be thinking about. I think that there's a lot of things that still remain to be seen in terms of how this behavior change is going to unroll. We're seeing the fastest adoption of technology ever in history. And
Yes.
to your point, not only are we seeing another big shift like we did 100 years ago, but this is another one of those shifts that is completely going to reshape the world economy into
Well
something
said.
we've never seen before. Very similar to the Industrial Revolution or the Agricultural Revolution before that. Like you couldn't fathom what the next steps looked like because it was just that stark of a difference. And I'm not the only one that thinks this. We are on the cusp of something like that once again. So bringing this back to kind of your guidance as a coach, knowing that the businesses that you work with are these smaller local businesses, so the ones traditionally under 50 million, traditionally, what can they be doing? Because I think we've all heard the message for the last 10 years. You got to take care of your people. You got to make them want to work for you versus somebody else. Like that's not a new message today.
No,
but we're still
no, not at all.
seeing the problem. If you're coaching a business through this problem, so if you're a business owner out there and you're saying, yeah, I'm feeling the same thing. It's hard for me to recruit and hire. I can't keep my team members. Like there's all these issues that we just described. How would you guide that business through this transition, through kind of this next phase?
All right. Biggest thing is stop being a stabilizer, right? Stop just protecting the business where it's at. Stop, fighting fires, right? You only celebrate things when they blow up in your face. You have to be a builder. You have to be a builder. Your identity has to shift and you have to go stop like, oh, this is as good as it can. I just fight fires every day. You have to go, what do I need to do to make this easier on me and everybody else in the business? That's one thing you've been really good at in our business is looking at it from a builder's aspect, right? These business owners have to start looking at, how do I build upon this? How do I take the knowledge out of my head and put it down, put it in AI, build something that makes everybody's life easier? Because then you can actually see what's broken in my business, right? So many stabilizers, as I call them, they flit around, they put out fires, they only deal with bad things because they refuse to go, how do I make that job easier? And I don't care if you're delivering buckets, hooking up a record, driving a semi truck, welding, plumbing, you name it. We have to start seeing what's the opportunity here for it. That's going to be a catalyst to their business really going into the next. And it's going to be, especially when you start looking at the generations that you're bringing in, like boomers, they're almost gone. Most boomers are not working today. Okay. Gen X, they're going to want to make it easy too. Millennials, you guys were on the cutting edge of technology. Your kids, all they know is technology. You have to start now, because I promise you, you're going to get somebody like, oh, these kids don't want to work. Yeah, they're going to walk into your place and go, that could be automated. That could be automated. That definitely. I have no idea why they're doing that by hand. Right? You have to be a builder today. You have to.
It makes me wonder if one of the top things you could do, just again, pure speculation, when hiring people, especially younger generation that quote unquote doesn't want to work. And I don't know if that's necessarily true.
I don't think it's ever been true.
But thinking about it, like, what if you lead with the, I'd love for you to work for this company because I want us all, including you, to not work so hard and not work so much. Help me figure out how to build a business that does that.
Absolutely. People want to hear that stuff today.
That'd be interesting.
People want to know, like, oh, if you start with us and you help us build this, you as a business owner have just taken a calculated risk. Calculated. Not ego driven. It's a calculated risk. Because now you're like, oh, now they have skin in the game. I built this process 10 years ago. Is it even relevant today? Well, let me look at it. Oh, look how much easier it could be.
So as we kind of bring this to a conclusion for today's conversation, and if you're following along, this is a new segment we'll be producing at least once a month, the Coach's Corner, to kind of get in and have some of these conversations. So if you've got suggestions, you've got things that you want to have us unpack a little bit, put it in the comments below. We'll keep a list and we'll go through that. But thinking about kind of this concept of team management, these are all things that are required in a business today in order for us to shift from the business owner having a job and eventually having something that they can step away from. And I say that cautiously because I know some people are like, I don't ever want to leave my business or exit. Totally fine. Eventually, one day you may have to make some level of step out of the business, whether because life forces you to or because you genuinely want to spend some time doing other things. What's the one piece of advice that you would leave the audience with if they're of that generation that's looking for that next step, that's looking for the, I can't keep doing this and having to do everything in my business, I'm ready to kind of take that next step and start to shift out in some way? If you could leave them with one piece of advice, what would you want to leave them with?
Look for the easiest, fastest thing you can take off your plate and automate within the team. Easiest, fastest, you hate doing it, drives you crazy, whatever it is. But until you give something up, nothing we say will ever matter.
I love that. And to make it even easier for y'all as the audience, I'm going to give you a gift. In the description of this video below, we've got a 10-question questionnaire, kind of chat little interface that you can go through that's going to score your dependency as the owner in your own business. It's going to give you a score so you have an idea of where you're at today, and it's going to give you a list of things that you can work on and start to implement in your business as a result of where you're at. So this is dynamic, this is specific for you, but it is one of those first steps that you can take to identify exactly what Coach Andy shared there. I'll put that in the description of this conversation here today. So with that, Andy, I appreciate this. This is fun to kind of get into kind of more coach type conversations. This has been the Ownership Advantage, and we'll be back again in about a month.